we're obviously going to be talking about Oracle's new planning and budgeting cloud solution. Just before we get to the demonstration, I'm George Pilling. I'm the Business Development Executive here. I'm also joined by my colleague, Mark Van Can, who's the Planning Practice Director. He'll be shortly doing a live demonstration of our retail model. I'm also joined by my colleague, Tony Dunn, who's also a Business Development Executive. And obviously, collectively, we work with a lot of retail organisations. What I'll do is that the agenda for this webinar will be, I'll do a short introduction to who Bravantia are, a little bit about sort of the traditional approach to finance, some of the more modern approaches, and how PBCS fits in that. Then I'll pass over to Mark Van Can, who will do a demonstration for you, and then obviously at the end we'll open it up to any questions that you can just shout out as you please. Of course, there's a little box on your right-hand side, so you know if something springs to mind as we're going through, please feel free to type away, and we'll certainly be do our best to address them. If not during the webinar, definitely at the end. Right, so a little background to who Bravantia are. We're a financial software supplier specialised in Oracle Hyperion Enterprise Performance Management solutions. That's inclusive of the S-Base, planning, HFM, and of course PBCS. We're one of the UK leading Oracle Gold partners, and we also focus on not only cloud solutions but also on-premise solutions for companies irrespective of size, complexity, or budget available. We're also really proud to have been asked to be a beta tester for PBCS. So we've been, involved with PBCS from the get-go. So we've got a wealth of knowledge about it. We've helped sort of construct it and develop it through its current lifespan. We're obviously based in our Guildford office, where we're speaking from today. We've also recently opened a Manchester office as well. So we really are nationwide. Just to give you a little bit of flavour of the kind of companies that we work with, here's a selection of our current client list. Some of you are obviously quite familiar with, like the Channel 4, Virgin Media, Crouchy Evelyn, and Regatta, and obviously be some less familiar, perhaps Li & Fung Europe and Skrill. But you can see there's quite a mix of industry, size, and obviously complexity. So what I thought I'd do now is just sort of compare of the traditional approach to finance at an enterprise level compared to the new sort of modern approaches. So of course, traditionally, spreadsheet was the tool of choice. While it's a great analysing tool, it does offer great modelling opportunities. It is a time resourcing tool. There's a lot of collating spreadsheets from different colleagues, different departments, business managers, getting that all together in a reasonable order to produce standardised reports, whether it be for internal use or external, is quite a laborious task. And you see on the slide that a lot of time, 80% of managed finance department's time is spent collating spreadsheets, and only 20% of the time actually analysing the data within it. The other challenge, of course, is the reliance on IT to actually get that data in there and cleanse it and to have it in a format that's actually usable. Which, when there's a little bit of downtime, is fine. When you get to critical times of the year, for instance, year end, that slow process is a bit of a hindrance. And of course, the other reference that we often hear is spreadsheets are personal productivity tools. They tend to reflect more the individual that's inserting the data or the business department that they're managing. So there tends to be a lot of a breakdown in the business plan, business alignment. Often there's multiple versions of the truth. So there tends to be no real one direction that everybody knows and a platform that everybody knows that they can work from. So to compare that to sort of the modern approach, finance individuals and managers, controllers, directors, certainly are becoming more performance managers. So with the opportunity to have both financial and non-financial data available to make predictions and analysis, really gives them a fantastic data or platform which to make great decisions and investments and strategic positioning of the organisation. And of course, they're also seeking that standardised one version of the truth in a centralised system that can be accessed by all users to create real value-adding analysis. And of course, with that collection of data that they know they're confident in, they know is valid and up-to-date, they can make up-to-date, real-time decisions strategically about how to position the company moving forward. So obviously, how does that relate to Oracle's planning and budgeting cloud solution? Well, of course, it's a market leader with notorious and industry-renowned technologies underlying it, whether that be S-Base or Hyperion planning or the crystal ball technology. You know, it really has been quite a prominent leader in the Gartner quadrant, certainly for planning, forecasting, and reporting. Also, it offers a fantastic analyzing capabilities with what-if modeling, best and worst case scenario. So you can also, what if we open 2 new stores? How does that affect our revenue? What if we adjust pricing discount to compete with other competitors? That kind of thing for a retail organisation is really handy to have. Also, using that crystal ball technology to pull on historic data, you can make real accurate long-term forecasting trajectories. Of course, it has the power to do that over multi-years, so you can do that over 2, 3, 5 years. We actually have a housing organisation client who forecasts across a 50-year period, so you can quite easily see that the power that's within the solution. And of course, being a hierarchical structure, you've got a full drill down ability to look at, whether it be client or product or store, to really get a much greater depth of profit understanding and management. So that's sort of my introduction piece concluded. So now you've kind of heard of that, I'm going to bring that all together to Mark, who's going to demonstrate our PBCS retail model to get you a flavour of what it's actually like to interact with.
Great, thanks, George. You may notice you've got that little chat box in the bottom right of your screen. If you've got any questions as I go along, feel free to type them out, and I'll either answer them at the time or towards the end of the demonstration. The demonstration model which I've got is running on planning, budgeting, cloud services. Access to the system is just via either the web or through Excel, through an add-in. The server which I'm connecting to, or the cloud server, is actually based in the Netherlands. But when customers purchase this particular piece of software, they can pretty much choose where they'd like their system to be hosted. So the beauty of planning, budgeting, cloud service is that there's no installation, there's no hardware, there's no IT involvement. So all you do is you would simply buy a monthly subscription, and you buy a certain number of users. I think 10 is probably the minimum that they'd look to buy. You pay a monthly amount and you get a login and you get access to this cloud service. So it's very quick and easy. There's no delay in actually getting the hardware, getting software installed on your servers, and so forth, which can sometimes really drag the start of these projects out. Logging into the system, I'm going to show both flavors. I'm going to show you both the web interface as well as the Excel interface. I'll start off in the web. Each user will get a login and a password. What this does is, let's close off my. Just going to check to see if I've got mutes on everyone.
Okay.
Great. Okay, sorry for that delay. Logging into the service is simply as just having a URL, so you can pretty much connect from wherever you are. Takes you into a launch point. Now you'll notice that this has got a very sort of app-friendly orientation towards it. A lot of the software now is going down this route of being mobile-friendly, so this will go on any of your Android or your Apple iPads, and you'll notice it's pretty much just sort of single point and click, quite sort of clean interface that's relatively easy to get around, just so that when you roll this out to end users, getting them on board isn't going to take too long. They'll all be used to their Excel systems or their previous systems, so you really want this to be as smooth as possible. Typical starting point might be a dashboard. This is just a sample showing some of the key metrics within this particular system. My system is based around a gardening center group. The gardening center group is regional, so it's throughout the UK, pretty much broken down by county. Within the county, there'll be a number of garden centers which are budgeting their sales and expenses and so forth. This dashboard gives me an idea maybe of divisional sales. So this is at a total company level. I'm able to enlarge my divisional sales, and then I can drill into that data. So this is looking at the actual database itself. So I can click into it. I can now see what my breakdown of sales is by plants, furniture, gifts, bird care products, and so forth. So these are all the various things, all the different channels within the garden center that they're looking to analyze, looking to budget by. Obviously, plants is going to be the biggest area, so we can see from the graph. I can drill into that, and it'll give me a breakdown of the actual plants within that. So I've got a slightly higher level here. I can close this graphic off, investigate other areas of my dashboard. So I can have as many of these dashboards as I want, and they are specific to a particular user. So as they log into the system in the mornings, it recognizes maybe this person is only responsible for Surrey garden centers, and it would only give them that piece of information. So the system would actually look quite small for that particular person. And all the interfaces and everything I'm showing you is pretty much designed by the current person who would do your budget or forecasting spreadsheets and send them out. So there's no technical requirement here in putting the system together. It's pretty much all drag and drop. You know, the days of writing complicated scripts and taking ages to build things, I think are pretty much gone. So generally speaking, a few hours on the system sitting with a consultant gets you to a pretty good level of understanding and the ability to build this for yourselves. What I've got in front of me at the moment is a task list. You'll notice I've got tasks for central finance, for my budgeting, for my garden centers themselves, and some balance sheet and cash flow. What this does is it groups tasks together for particular sets of users. So I know that centrally my finance department is going to go through a number of tasks in order to set this company-wide, in this instance, sales budget. The way that they're going to do it is they're going to look at last year's actuals, and they're going to apply a set of drivers to those actuals in order to get a starting point for the sales budget. Other things on here, we can bring together maybe financial statements. So if I click on financial statements, it'll open up a PDF for me, just showing bits and pieces about my garden center. And this is pretty much showing that we can bring all types of different information into the system. It doesn't just have to be a grid where you're inputting numbers or reports. We can bring together new products that are being launched, new stores that are being launched, new channels, anything along those lines, bring it all into one interface so that the users don't have to hop in and out of a particular system in order to go and get more information. We're really trying to bring it into one place and just reducing the overhead on questions coming back to the finance team centrally. Steps can include loading actuals. We have a number of options here. We can either load just sort of flat text files as extracted from your sales systems or your GL systems. We can submit information through Excel, which I'll show a little bit later. Or we've got a tool which can actually interface into your source systems and map data from there into your reporting or into this planning system. So depending on the level of complexity, we can pretty much meet all of those areas. Once the data is in, Central Finance are going to get a first look at the system here. This is a typical grid that they'll be asked to fill in. On the left-hand side, I've got 3 drivers. So obviously you can have as many drivers here as you'd like. I've just got a very simple inflation percentage. I've got some price actions above inflation. I've got a volume increase percentages. This is looking at my budget for FY14, and it's broken down by month. So what this is implying is that if somebody wants to uplift the inflation for a particular set of products, the sales, it'll go up by 4% across the year. And this we can flex as we want. We can also project forward as many years as we want. But for the moment, we're just looking at an annual budget. Once I'm finished with this task, I can just click the completed button. What that'll show me is just an analysis of exactly where I am within the process itself. So I can see what I've completed, what I need to complete today, and what's there in the future. So all of these tasks have an associated timeline against them, and emails can be sent from the system to specific users to let them know that a particular task is coming close, and then they need to go in and set drivers or complete budgets or whatever the case is. Okay, having a look at how we actually use those drivers, what I've now got on this particular screen is I've got a breakdown of my product categories down the left-hand side, all my various plants. Going further down, I've got those plants adding into a total plant field, which is grayed out. So the gray is for summary or calculated fields, which is effectively the same as auto sum in Excel. And then I've got the white areas which are there for data input. And you can see that I've got a furniture category, I've got core retail, I've got some concessions, and below that adds into my total divisions. So these breakdowns can vary depending on the type of company that you are. If it's professional services, you might have it by consultant or by lawyer or by fee earner. If it's by product, your breakdown might look like this. So we pretty much take whatever your requirements are and we put them into the system to fit in a similar way to this. The next step within the process is I can see that I've got FY13 actuals. I've got a preset budget, which is exactly the same as the actuals. All I'm going to do is go into the system and say, for my bulbs plant category, I'd like to apply an inflationary price increase, which would pick up the percentages from the previous screen, and maybe also pricing action above inflation there. When I hit the save button, the system is now going back into the centralized database, is having a look at the calculations, picking up my actual sales, my budget, and it's going to uplift it using those percentages for me. So the idea here is that it's a very quick and easy way of going through and applying a whole bunch of drivers to a previous set of data, be it the actuals or budget, and then to create a new budget for you, much faster than going in and manually keying in all these numbers. And obviously, you can have as many drivers as you want in as many categories, but it's quite a good starting point centrally to start this process off. While this is good and it's fast to give you an initial view of your data, you might still want to go in and actually manually adjust those. So clicking on the next button takes me into a screen where now I've got a split across the year. I can see the drivers which have been applied. So I know to my bulb category of plants and my conifers, I can see that that's been uplifted. But I can go in, and if I wanted to, I can key in new numbers and submit that back into the system. So I've also got the option of manually adjusting the data which I've driven from the previous screen. You'll notice I've got a few items here which are slightly different color. So this 863, I know there's something underlying that. So what sometimes happens in your existing Excel models is you might have a user who wants to break down that third category of plants in this instance and they want to break that down into a greater level of granularity. So it might be that that level is not quite sufficient for them. They could come back to you and say, please, can you edit the Excel template, add some new categories in for me, or they could unfortunately break the Excel system themselves and just insert some rows. The way the system handles this is to say, I'd like to add some supporting detail to that line. So if I highlight that, I click on supporting detail, I'm able to go in and say, I want to add some additional information to this. I want a new line, so I want a new 6 it's going to be, and there's a value associated to that of 900. Clicking the Save button adds all of those together and updates my grid accordingly. So I'm then able to take this data and save this back into the database. So you can see in the top left we've got the Save button just running, and the system is automatically consolidating. So this would be adding up down into my plants, furniture, automatically, just as a byproduct of how the system works. How this might look if I open up in Excel, it's going to go in and say, a very similar interface. So what tends to happen is we have some of our customers choose to roll it out via the web. Other customers still like to use Excel, and therefore they can use this particular interface. So I'm just going to hit the refresh button here. Again, it's going to try and authenticate me against the system. Okay, so on a separate sheet, I'm just going to go in. And this is the add-in at the top. This is called Smart View. It allows me to now interact with the system. The interface is very, very similar. So I can see the task list. I can see my central finance task list. I can see how far I am through it. The green items have been ticked off, so they're finished. And I was busy adjusting the central sales data budget. If I double click on that, it opens that exact same form for me. You'll notice that I've got the ferns. I can look at the ferns and right click and say I can see there's something below that. I'm going to look at the supporting detail. Now I can see fern 6 for 900, which is coming to exactly the same number that I've got in my central database. So regardless of whether I choose the Excel or the web component, I'll always get exactly the same data coming back. Where this is maybe quite nice is you can still use cell links, so you can have your existing Excel models in the background, and you can effectively create a form like this, ask your users to copy and paste or just use cell links to their existing sheets, and they can just come in here and say, fine, I'm happy with these numbers. That's going to be 12,000, so copy and paste it in, hit the Submit Data button, and this would just push it back into the database for them. So it's potentially a slightly quicker way of them going through it. And again, this is just saving, and you can see now that's gone back into the system for me. So I think I'll switch back into the web component, and I'll go to my next task in the list, which is going to be allocation of the central budget. This is just to demonstrate how the allocation process might work. It's a very simple allocation. It's based on floor space. So I've gone ahead, and at head office level, I've got a sales budget of 1.1 million. Okay, it's slightly different to the total value which I've got currently within the system, which has been broken out by the various garden centers. I can adjust my floor space. I can add in new garden centers if I wanted to. Once that's done, I'd hit the Save button. The system is now going to allocate based on floor space of the total group, the 1.1 million sales for head office. And in the bottom right, we should see that number reflect the same. So now I can see that the south number is exactly the same as the head office allocation. So obviously we can have as many allocations as we want. We can also vary the type of allocation method that we use. This might be floor space, but we could base that on something like headcount or FTE, or on sales or turnover. So we're not really limited. As long as we have that data within the system, we can then go ahead and allocate that out. At this point, I might have a workflow in effect, whereby I'm now going to ask my garden centers themselves. So in this model, I've got 142. I'd like them to go ahead, review the sales numbers, input some expenses, budget for some staff, and then submit that back to me. And using this this workflow, I can see exactly who has submitted and who's still outstanding. So it's once they've submitted, it'll lock their screens for them, and I'm then kind of notified as to exactly how far I am within the process. So it's a nice way of tracking, whereas before you might have had a very large Excel spreadsheet and you tick them off as green when they send you their updated budget. This is just adding some control to that particular exercise. So from the garden center finance manager's perspective, the first thing they might do is have a look at what has actually been set for them. So what is their budget? I'm currently looking at the Woking Garden Center. If I was responsible for more than one, I would go ahead and select whichever garden center I'd like to submit information for. And this is limited depending on their particular security. So if the user is only responsible for the Surrey area, he would have a very small list, would only see the garden centers within that region. They'd go through, review the data in exactly the same way that the previous screens did, submit the information, and move on to their next task. Just by clicking on next. I'd now like to ask them to input some expenses. So I've got my screen looking at the FY13 actuals, again the budget, and then the ability to go and edit that budget. So I can either input it at a total year figure, or I can break that down by quarter or by individual month. This will pretty much reflect on the left-hand side your P&L, and that would be lifted out of your existing general ledger system, where the actuals would then feed into the system from, and you can get a variance analysis against that. Moving on to the next task, there's certain lines within the P&L which you might want to break down in more detail. So this example is showing my salaries. Salaries within the P&L would also have an associated pension, NI, car allowance, whatever it is. This is just allowing us to break that particular line in the P&L down, maybe by employee. So you can pull in the employee's salary, you can give a salary increase, giving rise to a new annual salary, and then you can say that a particular employee, so Cindy, for instance, over here, is inactive in April. I'll just copy and paste it. Let's see if that'll work. And then when I hit the Save button, that will phase the data in the bottom grid, which is linked into my P&L. So that I'd expect the May salary for Cindy to become a 0, and that would then be reflected within my P&L itself. So this sort of methodology is used for staff costs. It's used for sales, where we can break it down by product. It's used for depreciation, where we can break it down by different types of assets. So really, if there is that extra level of granularity that you'd like to break the data down into, this is a typical example of how we might do that. So once this is all complete, we typically then just review the P&L. This is a screen now just looking at a total level. So if I try and break that down, I can see I'm looking at the Woking Garden Centre. I'm looking at all my staff, and I'm looking at all my divisions, so my plants, my concessions, my restaurants, and so forth within the garden centres. So it's summing it all up, and that's just an automatic process within the system. I can also minimize my profit line, and then I can drill down into that. Okay, and that's just giving me a breakdown. This is also, while this process is quite nice, the system allows me to do an ad hoc style of reporting. So this particular screen here is just an ad hoc pivot table, effectively, which is looking at the database, and this will be reflecting whatever I've input before, but it allows me to drill down into that. So I can double click on total company, on South, on Surrey, and I can see the garden centres within the Surrey region. I'm looking at profit before tax at the moment, and I'm looking at FY13 actuals there, and then a centre budget for FY14. Okay, so, and these ones you can pretty much save locally onto your machine, and then next month you can open it up, hit refresh, and see what the updated numbers are. So you can also generate reports using this method. Something else which is quite interesting within the system is if I wanted to now use that budget maybe to drive a forecast, what I can do is I'm just going to very simply say I want FY14's forecast to be an uplift of 2% of my FY14 budget, and then I want to drive this forward a number of years and save that into the system. So this is just one way of me creating maybe next year's forecast, a starting point, or even creating a 5-year plan. As George said, we've got certain companies that will go forward a lot of years, but typically most companies now are looking at a kind of a 5-year plan based off a monthly budget or forecast. And what this will then show me is, if I go into my next screen, I'll see now that I've got a profit for the financial period. I'm looking at a total company level. Within my working version of data, I'll see for FY14, I've got a particular profit, and then I've got a forecast for that same year, and then a forecast for 2 more years going forward. And that's been driven based on the percentages that I input before, and it's uplifted all the data within the system. Again, I can use my ad hoc capability within Excel to hit a refresh here, and you can now see that my numbers have come through after I've hit the refresh based on what I was doing there. And I can again go in here and investigate, add more staff, change my product mix slightly, uplift certain products, and see what effect that has on my P&L in the future. What you can also do then is, if you wanted to really start working with those numbers, you could say, I want to do some what if. So I want to create a what if version of this particular plan. This is taking all the data from my forecast that I've just created, and it's copying it into a what if version. Because it's exactly the same at the moment, my data is going to look identical. But what it allows me to do is firstly to have a look and review, and I can see that the numbers are exactly the same. Again, if I go and refresh, I'm expecting these what if members here now to populate. But what I can do is go back into one of my previous screens. I'll go next, where I had some inflation, change it to what if here, click the apply button. Instead of these percentages, I might want 9% in FY16. Obviously, your what if would be a lot more detailed down at a product level, down at an employee level. This is just to give you a flavor of how you can do this forecast and a what if on the forecast, and then also just see that data as an end result. So you'll notice again, the saving data is actually performing a calculation, taking all my FY16 data and applying the new 9% calculation against it. Confirms that it's completed. I can click on the next button again, and you'll now notice that my what if is different to my working. And you can go through, users can enter as much information here as they want. They can plan for new stores, new product lines. If they like that particular set of data, they can either keep it and copy it back, or they can just clear what they've seen there and restart the process with a copy, and that'll just reset your progress. Again, within Excel, you can just go in, and now my FY16 what if forecast is slightly different to my FY16 working forecast. You'll notice the uplift has taken place. And so it's quite a nice kind of sandbox area that you can go through and analyze your data. Once all the data is in place, again, I've done some analysis. Quite often we'd like some reporting out of the system. So I can go to a reporting tab across the top over here. I've got a bunch of reports which have been set up. I can choose to view these reports either as an HTML report. You'll notice it's interactive, so I can pick if I wanted certain employees or certain divisions. I can hit the continue button. It's processing that report at the moment, going back to the server. And what it's brought through over here is a small P&L. It's got my actual, my center budget, and the forecast for FY14. I've also got a drop-down box whereby I can see this is running for all the garden centers within the Surrey region. And if I was to open this in a PDF format, just go back. This will actually print out a PDF report for me, and on each page it's going to put a separate P&L. So you'll notice on this first one I've got Allfold Garden Centre. I've then got the Croydon Way Garden Centre, and you can see I've got 11. So if I wanted to, I could run this for all 142 garden centres that I've got within the system, and it would just automatically put my P&L there. So this could be a sales report, it could be a flash on a Monday for weekly sales. Whatever the case is, you can very quickly generate a report like this and have it email off to relevant people who have the access for those particular garden centres or product groupings. Also, once all this data is within the system, I'm then able to go and analyze it. So I can keep my total company data here. I can have a look just by typing into a grid, sales, hit the refresh button. I can then drill down into my total company, into South, into Surrey. I can see the garden centres that make it up. If I want to just investigate Surrey, but I'd like to look at my product categories here, I can now double click into my core retail. I can see my plants, and then I can just apply any standard Excel functionality. I can create a graph. I can do a filter, a sort, see what my 10 best, 10 worst are. It's very straightforward to do that. What we also find is that when we set a system like this up, we typically set it up that the level of granularity within the system would pretty much be at the level that you want to budget at. But we do have customers who would like to see, a much greater level of granularity, almost down to order level or invoice level. And it is possible for us to store that information within the system and then surface that within reports themselves, and then compare that summarized data against the budgets and the forecasts. But generally speaking, our users wouldn't budget or forecast down at that very granular level, almost transactional level, but we can hold that data for interrogation purposes if they wanted to investigate it. Okay. Using a grid like this, then, we're able to really see which are my most profitable products or staff members, if they're fee earners, and we can really analyze that data by going into this. Okay, hopefully I've given you a flavor of how the product looks, how it feels, how it works, and how it might work within your organization itself. So I think at this point I'll pass back to Tony.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I've been keeping an eye on the chat session, and there's been a couple of questions, excuse me, that have already been asked. Probably the first one to George. How much does it cost?
That's a good question. Well, obviously, I think it was mentioned earlier, it's broken down as a subscription-based pricing structure per user. So a minimum of 10 users at a cost of £82 per user. But obviously, of course, within that, there is a little bit of flexibility depending on number of users and expected time scale as well. But generally, £82 per user with a little bit of flexibility.
Okay, thank you, George. And probably this one to yourself, Mark. How long does it take to typically implement?
It is dependent, obviously, on exactly what's required. In general, the first phase of the project is anything between 40 and 60 days. So that would typically be replicating the existing budgeting model and enabling the system for forecasting, as well as bringing actuals into the system. So generally, we'd look at that as a first phase, and that would include getting the administrators up and running, getting end users into the system, submitting data. So generally, anything between 40 to 60 days.
Okay, thank you. There has been another question asked, but I think we've covered most of it, but I don't know whether you want to elaborate on this, Mark, but the question was, does it work with all Microsoft products, so in terms of Word, Excel, PowerPoint?
Yeah, so that particular interface, or the add-in, the Smart View add-in, which I've shown over here, that is also available with any of the products. You'll notice I've opened a PowerPoint here. If I go to Smart View, I can go to my panel, and I'm going to share connections. Again, it's going to ask me to log in. What this allows me to do is to say, I showed off a report a little bit earlier. I'm going to open this report. So we have one or two customers who use either Word or PowerPoints for their board meetings or for presentations. What this is doing is having a look at that particular report. I hit these two refreshes, I hit the finish, and it's actually going to paint this report into PowerPoint or Word, in this instance PowerPoint, and it brings the data exactly as it is now. So it brings it into PowerPoint. I can see what these numbers are. You'll notice that it's put one on each of the pages of the slides, and I can then configure this. I can put it into the slideshow exactly where I'd want to. You'll notice that it's brought data out. The report run date is run now. I would save this PowerPoint exactly as it is now, and next month I can open this up. I can simply go to Smart View, hit the refresh button or refresh all, and that would then repaint all of these slides for me with that information out of the system. So it's always going to be live. It just means that if you've got these packs which you put together and you send out, it can be quite a quick way of pulling that data in. We can also interrogate specific numbers. So if you've got a sentence, something like, for FY14, my net profit is X, that X can be driven out of the system as a type of smart tag. So as you open the reports against next month, and you say it's for FY15 now, when that 15 changes, you hit refresh, the smart tag will pull that number out of the system for you. So you're always looking at the latest data. So yeah, there is a very nice interaction with Microsoft Office.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. I think what I'd like to probably do now is open up the lines and unmute the lines. So if there are any other further questions, please feel free to obviously talk to us now, and the lines are now open.
The product anyway.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I don't think there's. I think we've covered everything in quite a lot of detail. Obviously, we're probably end the webinar there. But thank you very much for joining us. Of course, we're happy to demonstrate this on a one-to-one basis in more detail, relevant specifically to your organisation. And this, specific key business criteria you want to approach, then of course let us know, and we're happy to come on board and show you. But once again, thank you very much for attending, and hopefully speak to you all soon.
Because then there's tomorrow, because in terms of what the sales wise that we see through, that each customer has a salesman. Right, can a customer have more than one salesman? Not anymore. Right, okay. Well, you're thinking okay.